It's November 2019.
Hi, Editing Emma here. It's actually December 2019 now because I am really bad at editing things on time. And also, the internet during Thanksgiving, because everyone was home for the holidays, completely crapped out on me. So you're getting this in December. It's still 2019. It's fine. I'm fine. You're fine. Thank you for watching.
I am legally obligated to talk about Blade Runner. And I want to make this clear. This isn't an original bad, sequel good kind of video. I think both the original Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 are masterpieces of cinema. That being said, Blade Runner 2049 speaks to me more personally, and it's one of the few great unplanned sequels, so I still want to talk about it. Original Blade Runner is a landmark of cyberpunk aesthetic, with some fantastically handled themes about society and what it means to be human. Blade Runner 2049 expands on these themes in a really beautiful way. It also expands on the aesthetic in a really beautiful way. God, this movie is gorgeous. Roger Deakins was so deserving of that Oscar win, and about damn time too. I actually own the art and soul of Blade Runner 2049, and it's maybe my most prized possession. Thank you to my film criticism professor for enabling my Harrison Ford habit. It probably is a disservice to compare the two, but since comparison is what the human brain wants to do, we're gonna compare them anyway. A comparison Ford, if you will. I will see myself out for that joke, I'm sorry. The first movie presents the answer to the what makes a human human question through Roy Batty, a character that is flawed, sometimes cruel, and even downright sadistic. Yet, in the end, we see the value he places on life, even the life of the man who has been hunting him. The original Blade Runner's message boils down to, sometimes the things we consider to be subhuman are the things that exhibit the most admirable human traits: empathy, sacrifice, love. And at the end of the day, wouldn't we rather make assumptions about what is and isn't human based on humanity's positive traits? And to steal an argument from H. Bomber Guy, does it really matter in the end who in the movie is or isn't human? The whole moral of the movie is that the replicants are just as human as anyone else, despite being replicants. Deckard and Rachel's relationship even further drives that point home. So whether or not Deckard is a replicant doesn't matter in the end, because he and Batty are still equals by the time Batty dies. Blade Runner 2049 continues this argument, but this time instead of arguing whether or not the replicants are equal to their human counterparts, we're given the character of Joy, who is somehow even lower than replicants due to the fact that she's essentially a sex hologram.
Oh, you don't like real girls.
And to continue to discuss that, we need to talk about Joy as a character, so... Joy is easily one of the most complex and interesting parts of the movie. She is essentially the emotional core of the film, and her relationship with Kay is a grounding element in a film that is incredibly heavy and dark. She's the source of a lot of humor in the film.
Would you read to me? It'll make you feel better.
You hate that book.
I don't want to read either.
And you really believe her relationship with Kay.
I want to be real for you.
You are real for me.
It works so much better than Deckard and Rachel's relationship, one, because Deckard and Rachel's relationship was never really meant to be an emotional core, and two, look, I don't want to talk about the sex scene from 1982, but I will admit that it is a big reason why I prefer 2049 to the original, but feel free to disagree with me about its role in the movie. A lot of people do. Pretentious film students who think it's like an important metaphor about something or whatever, don't beat me up. But yet, Joy is programmed. She's made of ones and zeros. She's designed to tell the listener everything they want to hear, and to love and to be dedicated to the person who purchases her, no questions asked, no strings attached. She spends the whole movie gassing up Kay, treating him kindly when basically nobody else does, telling him he's special, and feeding into the notion that he is actually Rachel and Deckard's child. Which, if you view it from the context of her having any kind of free will, is sweet and romantic if a little dangerous. But if you view it as her just doing what she's programmed to do, it goes from sweet and romantic to very sad and kind of disturbing. Basically, the question we need to ask is, can Joy pass the Turing test? Then that opens up a new can of worms. Kay, Batty, all the other replicants are flesh and bone, but aren't they programmed too? Is the only thing that defines a human being free will? Do actual human beings have free will? And look, I don't have the answer to any of those questions. I took 1 semester of philosophy in college because I had to, and I hated every second of it. However, I will say that the movie makes arguments in both directions. Both Kay's Joy and the Joy on the Street call Kay Joe, which hints to the programming theory, but Joy's love and devotion to Kay seems to far surpass that of a sexy hologram on the street trying to hit up some random guy, which ties back into that message about who are we to decide what is and isn't worthy of human respect. If it walks like a human, talks like a human, and loves like a human, it might be a human, even if it's a sexy hologram. The movie goes into a few different directions about more concrete things that might make replicants more human, but they're all just as inconclusive as Joy. Lieutenant Joshi believes that replicant pregnancy will bring about public opinion that replicants are human enough to be extended basic human rights, whereas Neander Wallace only sees it as a way to pump out more replicants to continue using as slaves and to advance human colonization. Did I mention this movie touches on colonialism too? It's no musical comedy, David.
How do things seem to be 40 years from now?
It's no musical comedy, David.
So since we can recognize at least the replicants as close enough to human to be considered human, let's talk about the only human emotion that matters. Yearning. You ever yearn? You ever want? You ever want to sing a Disney song about how bad you desire? And we all have one common desire.
To be special, to be unique. Or maybe I'm just an Enneagram 4, I don't know.
And this movie talks a lot about being special. Because yes, we are living in the era of special snowflakedom where participation and trophies are aplenty and people all think they're special and different, even though the boomers have been doing this for years. So like, okay boomer. But we are not saying okay boomer to Blade Runner 2049. Because this movie is incredibly sympathetic to the plight of this Gen Zillennial generation who's had the bubble burst for them. When we grow up and realize that we've been lied to. We're not special or unique. We're very normal, we'll live normal lives and probably die in our mediocrity. Which hurts when we live in a society that somehow both demonizes and romanticizes the unique, the standout, the special. We're all taught from a young age that we'll all find dreams and be happy, when in reality adulthood is just checking your email and crying a lot. But Kay is not demonized for wanting to be special. Frieza's response to him when she realizes that Kay thought it was him is that of empathy. She doesn't mock him for daring to dream that he was bigger than he actually is. If anything, it becomes a moment that bonds all of the replicants within the Resistance together, and Kay's arc becomes his acceptance that he's not special. Which comes to basically my only big problem with the movie. Kay dies at the end. The moral for him is dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do, which isn't a terrible moral, I guess, but it doesn't do his arc much of a service. There's this great little moment where he hands the wooden horse, the source of motivation and encouragement to him that he is the child, over to Deckard before he walks into Anna's lab. And it's like, oh, hey, he's okay with the fact that it's not him, and it's him wanting Deckard and Anna to experience happiness. But then it kills him? Maybe I just don't get it, but I think it would have been more poignant if Kay had survived, moved on, and created a found family with Deckard, Anna, and the rest of the replicant uprising. Because then not being special wouldn't have killed him. It wouldn't have destroyed him. He survives because he's stronger than that. Unlike Batty, whose death serves as the ultimate proof that replicants really are more human than human, Kay's death serves no purpose to either the narrative or his own arc. That, aside from the painful lack of any major POC representation, is really my only problem with the movie. But hey, the ending is kind of vague. I mean, Kay could have died, or Deckard could have come running back out like 5 minutes later because he abandoned his boy! Anyways, a dissection of the themes in both movies could be a video of their own, so let's move on. In Blade Runner, Rick Deckard serves as a point-of-view character into the world that he inhabits. We see the world from his perspective based on how he operates, and therefore the shift in his view of the replicants is also a shift in the audience's. This is why I don't like him being a replicant, because Deckard's flawed nature as a terrible person, and make no mistake, Deckard is a terrible person, but so is Batty, Priss, and literally everyone else in this movie aside from like Rachel and JF Sebastian, is something that connects him to the replicants. They all have blood on their hands. Having an asshole POV human character works for the original film. Having Kay be awful, though, doesn't really work. Kay is a far more sympathetic character than Deckard ever was, and that's okay. I don't think we needed Kay to be as callous and cold as Deckard was, because 2049 is making a very different point. Kay is a sympathetic point of view character because it's needed for the theme of specialness and how you don't need to be special to be a good person. He's allowed to be a victim of his circumstances because of his nature, and it becomes a part of his arc to overcome his nature. After all, he does have the worst job of them all, killing his own kind. Yet, throughout it all, it's never a choice. Deckard, as far as we know, chose to become a Blade Runner. Kay was built for the job. Everything about Kay's character, from his relationship with Joy, to his circumstances, to how he reacts to each new piece of information that comes his way about who he truly is, shows him time and time again to be someone who is worth rooting for. Deckard survives in an attempt to redeem himself, and to continue on the legacy of Roy Batty, and he kind of survives for the same reason in 2049. Again though, Kay should have lived. Also, I have to praise Ryan Gosling for this performance. It is astounding. He goes from the controlled, stoic replicant at his baseline
Oh, you don't even smile.
to having a complete mental breakdown by the end of it. It's so good, it is such a good performance. Another character that has an interesting parallel to the originals is Neander Wallace. Wallace has taken up the mantle from Tyrell in the first movie, but I think the difference between the two is incredibly telling. Tyrell was charming, almost loving to the replicants he created. He played chess with his workers, he complimented Batty on his brains. Wallace, on the other hand, is kind of terrifying, and not just because he's played by Jared Leto, who I have very mixed feelings about. Wallace comes as a condemnation of the hyper-capitalistic mindset that Tyrell had, showing him as an egomaniac who is willing to build a literal slave class that is virtually indistinguishable from humans in order to continue to colonize the rest of the galaxy. He also is a massively abusive and controlling figure in the life of Love, who I am so sorry that I slept on as a character the first time I saw this movie because she's so brilliantly written. Love is an assassin, deadly, cold, and precise. Yet she's also stuck in a state of arrested development that leaves her eerily childlike. Her devotion to Wallace, something she is forced to prove to him time and time again, strongly resembles the relationship between a narcissistic parent and an eager-to-please child. For example, in the scene where he's inspecting the newest crop of replicants, he kills the replicant right in front of Love, with one of his devices watching her, daring her to flinch. Then, when she proves herself to him this time, he rewards her with compliments. She absolutely thrives off of Wallace's approval, views him as something of a home base, and it is a driving force for all of the terrible things she does throughout the film. Wallace, extending his control over her, also informs her worldview. There's a scene in the movie where Love is attacking the people living in the landfill so that Kay can get information on the born replicant child. She's literally murdering people left and right while getting her nails done. She treats everything like it's a game. Something she learned from Wallace's slash and burn way of doing business.
I'm the best one.
He even refers to her as one of his children.
You don't have children, do you?
Well, I have millions.
I also think we need to talk about Deckard in 2049 too. It's a very different character than Deckard in the first movie. Shifting Deckard from the main character and fleshing him out by giving him something he actually seems to love and care about gave him a layer of depth that he lacked before. They also gave him a dog, which is great. I love that dog.
There's certain emotions you have for animals and certain contexts that you have for a guy that's got a dog and stuff. And it was used very successfully, I think, in the movie.
Thank you, Dennis Villeneuve, for not killing off the dog. We have no choice but to stand. But I think the real defining moment of the shift from Deckard in 2019 to Deckard in 2049 is the scene where Wallace offers him a new Rachel, and he responds with, "Her eyes were green," which they weren't. But it's his way of telling Wallace that he could never replace her. He could never replicate what made the original Rachel so special to him. That's the moment when we really see how deeply Deckard was impacted and changed from the events of the first movie. And it's really powerful, because it made me actually like Deckard, which isn't necessary, especially in the first movie, but it is helpful in this movie. Now, I spent the entirety of my last video talking about what makes a good subversion, and I even name-dropped this specific movie as an example of how to do it well. As sort of a TLDR for that video, basically what makes a good subversion is a subversion that is built into the plot or themes in a way that is logical. A good subversion isn't a Gotcha! Don't you feel stupid for following all of my foreshadowing to its obvious logical conclusion? Nor is it, here's a conclusion that I pulled out of a hat without looking. It should be built into the plot, but it also shouldn't be spelled out. Blade Runner 2049's subversion is twofold. One, it is foreshadowed, but you'll only catch it when you go back to rewatch it. Anna crying when she tells Kay the memory is real, there's a bit of every artist in their work line, the fact that it's so obviously set up that the child is a boy with no questions to this apparently dead girl, it all points to Anna being the child, or at the very least, not Kay, but you only catch it when you know what happens in the end. The subversion also benefits the themes. Again, the biggest theme in the movie is that you don't have to be special in order to make a difference or do the right thing. And Anna is basically a background character. We don't spend that much time with her. We do, however, spend the entire movie with Kay. In the end, we've developed far more of an emotional attachment to Kay, who is not the special, than to the actual special. Blade Runner 2049 is an incredibly powerful piece of cinema. I think, much like the original, it will only continue to garner more love and recognition the longer it exists. And this time, we can maybe do it without having to re-release it. Everything about its themes, plot, and characters builds a winding, beautiful story about love, loss, and humanity. There's no such thing as a perfect movie, but I really think that Blade Runner 2049 is about as close to perfect as a movie can get. Also, I desperately need Harrison Ford and Ryan Gosling to do another movie together, like a fun one this time, like a Christmas movie or a romantic comedy or something. Because this was an unbelievably fun press tour to follow, and good, because I need to go back and rewatch it to stop crying.